So how do you get out of the self-talk in the head? One, you need to know that that's self-talk in the head. If you don't know it's self-talk in the head, you become the self-talk in your head. You become the voice in your head. You don't know it, you are it. So you have to, the vital step, and I cannot tell you how to do that. That minimum of awareness needs to be there where you know that there's self-talk happening in my head and it's telling you some kind of story. It could be the briefest of stories, like, I shouldn't have come here, or I don't fit in here, all these people are too spiritual for me, or I'm so spiritual, these people are not spiritual at all. It's all little stories in the head. Even every fragment of self-talk is a little story in the head that goes around. And then you look at reality through the lens of the little story. It's not just one story, of course, there comes another one and another. And some stories are not little, they may be big stories about yourself and your life and what's gone wrong with it, or what's gone right with it. So even that's a story. More pleasant than if it's gone wrong. So you need to know when the self-talk happens in the head, the knowing is not part of the self-talk. The knowing is just an awareness that there is self-talk. The moment there is an awareness that there is self-talk, the possibility of freedom from the self-talk opens up. If that awareness is not there, there's nothing you can do. You have to wait until life knocks you over the head, so that finally some awareness comes in and you go, ah. So you might have to slip on a banana skin or something, because you self-talk, and suddenly you go, oh, life told you to wake up. Awakening, which is a term that's been used for thousands of years in the spiritual context, not in the conventional context. To awaken means to come out of sleep in conventional language, terminology. But in spiritual terminology, to awaken means to awaken, one could say, basically, to awaken out of the self-talk in the head. Because the self-talk in the head is a form of hypnosis, self-hypnosis. You are hypnotized, you have been hypnotized by society, your surroundings, the surrounding culture, even the language that you were taught to use, that becomes a large part of the self-talk, although some of the self-talk is also accompanied by images, but a lot of it is language. And all that, you've been conditioned, and this is gone, you are possessed by that, which is an energy formation, and humans are possessed by that and mistake that conditioned entity, which consists of thoughts. They're so trapped in it, they're so identified with it, they believe in every thought that comes into their head. It's absurd, but normal. Well, another word rather than absurd, I could say it's mad, but it's normal. It creates an incredible amount of suffering, unnecessary suffering that humans create for themselves and for others. You can't create suffering for yourself without making others suffer who are close to you and whoever comes into contact with you. An enormous amount of suffering is created by not realizing that a large percentage of your problems consist of self-talk in the head. That's amazing. And once you see that, Okay. And then you can have a little bit of awareness and say, who am I? Am I that story, or am I the one who sees that, who recognizes that there's self-talk? And in order to recognize that there's self-talk going on in you, that's not a thought, there's just an aware presence that, And then the compulsive nature of self-talk lessens somewhat because some awareness has come in. The light of awareness has come in. And then you realize you are that light of awareness. You are the awareness. And there's a shift. The head may not immediately stop. It'll want to carry on. The self-talk wants to carry on. There's a momentum to it. You can observe that momentum. If you can't do it in yourself, you can observe it in others. Once they have a story and they're telling you their story, they can't stop. They want to go on. They don't. And they don't want an end. If they're talking about their problems, they don't want an end to their problems. They want a continuation of the story, which is the problem. They don't know that. That's why we call it unconscious. They don't know that their primary thing is they want the continuation of the story, because that's the continuation of the fictitious person that cannot live without its story, its storyline. And so those people, do they want an end to their problems? Of course they will probably tell you, yeah, I'd love. No, they don't. They don't want an end to their problems because that would be an end to their story, which is their identity. They don't want an end to their sense of identity. I need my story. All the things that I've been telling myself in my mind about myself and other people and my parents and my relatives and my co-workers and my ex-wife and my ex-husband, and what people did to me and what I did and shouldn't have done, failed to do. Who am I without that? I can't let go of that. I need to think about this more. So it becomes a habitual place, the habitual place of the mental noise, where you feel, that's me. And so every therapist knows that you always reach a point with your clients, patients, whatever, depending on the school of therapy, depends whatever you call your clients, your patients, whatever. There comes a point when you hit that resistance. They don't want to be free of their problems. And that the big challenge is is this person going to overcome that barrier? Because that barrier is not just becoming free of my problems, but also becoming free of a very limited and ultimately fictitious sense of identity, the me.
I've read all your books and I listen to your recordings pretty much on a daily basis. And I don't say that to build up an ego that doesn't exist. It leads into my question. What I find in trying to practice the power of now, trying to be conscious without thought, is a very heavy inner dialogue of all the principles and things that I've read, like, how should I do this? What would Eckhart say? And actually my thought process starts getting more active. And I think I'm losing the presence by that thought process. And then I think of your latest book with the cartoons, which I love, which I think there's one with a little bird in the tree. He's talking to the dog, and he's very upset. And the dog says, what's wrong? And the bird says, well, you know, I'm thinking about yesterday and this and that, and I'm worried about what's going to happen in a week, 2 weeks, about the future. What do I do? What do I do? And the dog just looks at him and says, stop thinking. So how do I, you know, it seems you try to stop thinking, but and you read all this and you try to practice it, but yet in any given situation, I find that in order to get closer to practicing it or even practice it, it's causing a lot of thoughts to happen. So is that different kind of thoughts, or those thoughts that I should break that kind of habit, and if so, how?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now, there's a lot of talk these days about, not just talk, actually it's happening, addictions. Many people are addicted to all kinds of things, substances. But one of the greatest addictions, or rather the greatest addiction, you never read about it in the papers, because the people who are addicted to it don't know it. It's the addiction to thinking. It's actually addictive. Can't stop thinking. It's like can't stop drinking, can't stop smoking, can't stop eating, can't stop thinking. Thinking is the greater addiction than any of these. And it's an addiction because it's been a drug, it's been around for so long, and it's a pseudo sense of self. So it's a great reluctance on the part of most people to let go of thinking, which is equated with the state of sleep, to let go of thinking. There isn't that much to understand in this teaching. There's a little bit to understand about how the ego works, but even that is just mainly a self-observation. The main thing about it is presence. Presence. And presence is a space of no thought, but presence can also be there in the background even when thinking is happening. You can still be not completely involved in the thinking. Thinking loses the ability to create havoc in your life and confuse you. So your choice then is not to understand more or to bring some intellectual analysis to the practice, but to practice the state of not thinking, which can be arrived at by various ways, as you probably know. If you don't think about it, just do it. Becoming more aware of the present moment and accept it as it is slows down the overactive mind, is one thing. Because a lot of the overactivity of the mind is an attempt to get away from the isness, the simplicity of the present moment. So to become more aware of the present moment as a practice, have perhaps little pointers in your office, at home, in your car. Let's say present moment or whatever, or a symbol for it. And there are different entry points into the present moment. Present moment awareness means thinking subsides, may not disappear completely, but something else arises that is primary. We call it presence or awareness. Buddhists call it mindfulness, which I don't use because it implies your mind is full of things, but it isn't, of course. It's just a mistranslation. So, to be present, first of all, use the present moment to become. But how do you become conscious of the present moment? Now, when you get it, after a while, you can actually sense the presence of the present, so to speak, directly, and there it is. But helpful things are sense perceptions, take you out of thinking. If you're not judging the sense perceptions, labeling, naming, looking around, anywhere, wherever you are, look around. Practice sense perceptions without this compulsive interference of naming what you're perceiving. Oh, that's a beautiful flower. I wonder what it's called. I don't know what it's called, so that helps. I can be free of thinking. If I know what it's called, I can say, oh, that's such, and then drop that. And see what it means to perceive without the interference of concepts, words. At this moment, for example, you're looking at me. Now, let's say between now and now, were you thinking? No. Okay, and again, between now and now, were you thinking or present? No thought. And while I speak, do you need to think to understand what I'm saying, or can you just listen and understand it?
Just listen.
And this is what you're doing. And so that's part of the teaching and the function of the spiritual teacher. Imparting information is secondary. What I'm telling you now is secondary. What is primary is the underlying state of consciousness, which is presence. That's the teaching. But you can't talk about that. It's underlying. But a sign that it's working is that while you listen, there's no thought. There's just an alert presence. And when the so-called teacher stops speaking for a moment, the alert presence remains. It does not need to be filled with anything. Shh, shh, like now. What is there to think about? Nothing. Now, if we do this for longer, at some point, your mind will probably start up and think, how much longer is he going to sit there? And when that happens, you can allow your mind to say, how much longer is he going to sit there and say nothing, and then come back to presence. And then some other thought will come. What's this all about? And then you can allow that thought to arise and then be present again. Which means you're not really, your priority is no longer to follow the thought where it wants to take you, because the thought has a magnetic pull. It wants more of your consciousness, but it wants to grow, because it's a little entity. It wants to grow, so it wants your attention. And in subtle ways, it tries to get your attention. It says, it might even use a bodily feeling. It says, God, I'm hungry suddenly. Why didn't I need to eat something? And then you think of what restaurant am I going to afterwards? And so the presence is gone, you are looking for a restaurant in your mind. Which means the thought used as some bodily thing to make thoughts out of it, completely pointless, because you can't find a restaurant because you're standing here. But it can use all kinds of things to manufacture more, to get your attention. And if you're not careful, if you don't know the mechanism, it's not so much an intellectual understanding, but a simple realization that this is what the mind does. It tries to pull you in. It's fine, that's what it does. Once you know that, you can allow a thought to arise without following it where it wants you to go, which is into another bigger thought and a bigger one. So then you become like my dog when it finds a scent. And then suddenly, even when the dog is off leash, usually she's fine, she just runs around you, but suddenly she picks up a scent, and then she goes off completely unaware of surroundings or anything, and she just follows it. And she could get lost. She goes off to the horizon sometimes, just disappears. And that's, when you follow a thought, it goes like that. You can wake up 20 minutes later, and it started with being a little bit hungry and thinking of a restaurant, and it ends up with thinking about how dreadful your life is.